Hey there, Jordan with Status Coup. Hope everybody's having a lovely day. It is Thursday, July 7th, 2022. Big show today. Big show today. Please do your patriotic duty in the United Corporations of America. Smash the like button. It's right under the video. Share this live stream. The more people that share, the more people that will see. I thought about it today. I even discussed it with somebody, Dean, who does some freelance work for us here. And I said to myself, you know what? It's always a tough balance because I've prided myself journalistically of really focusing on what matters, the working class, oppressed people, communities being devastated through environmental genocide, economic injustice. A lot of stories that aren't sexy on YouTube and are not, drama or go viral on YouTube, but kind of what people know Status Coup for. Kind of what people support us, particularly people who pay money every month as supporters, Status Coup members, which we could only grow as far as our membership takes us. That's why we're organizing a reporting trip that we're going to go on probably in a week and a half. More on that later. That's going to be an inflation reporting trip. But I said to him, it's always hard to find a balance because sometimes I really just want to rip people a new one, not really for like the sake of drama, but because I genuinely think they need to be ripped. And I genuinely think that these people are hoodwinking a lot of good-natured people into thinking that they're righteous on certain things. So it's kind of hard to find that balance because I shit on a lot of channels because all they do is spend their time attacking other YouTubers, attacking other journalists instead of focusing on real issues. So I don't want to become that, but I realize, you know what? It doesn't have to be either or. Sometimes it's fine to go after certain people if you're being genuine, if you're not just doing it for clicks per se, but you're doing it because you truly believe it and you truly think certain people with large platforms and large followings are really doing disgusting things that are hurting the society at large and are hurting the left and the progressive movement. So I really thought today, honestly, we're going to cover something related to Pete Buttigieg a little bit later and have a guest on from South Bend. But I really had to go after Tucker Carlson today. I don't do it often, but I think it's necessary. And then it might trigger some people because, there's a lot of fanboys out there of Glenn Greenwald. If you dare criticize him, if you have not seen this appearance Glenn Greenwald had on Tucker Carlson in Brazil, it's one of the most pathetic, shameful things I've ever seen. And people who truly believe that Glenn Greenwald has principles anymore, I hope you're watching this with an open mind. But let's start with Tucker Carlson, okay? And super chats are welcome. I'll read them at the end. Let's start with Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson went on a panel or a conference today with Ben Smith. Ben Smith used to be like the head of BuzzFeed News. Then he left BuzzFeed and shifted to the New York Times as a columnist. Then he left the New York Times and then shifted to, I don't know, he's starting a new media company called Semaphore. I think that's a terrible name. I don't really know what that media is going to be. I don't know what that news outlet is going to be about, but he's currently kind of in the beginning stages of launching that. But he hosted a panel today interviewing some folks. I think he had Taylor Lorenz on, the Washington Post reporter that is very controversial, but he also had Tucker Carlson on. And credit to Ben Smith, he actually challenged Tucker Carlson, which is more than I could say for a lot of other people. And Tucker Carlson, I've just never seen someone lie this much and get away with it. And this person, Tucker Carlson, who lied through his teeth during this panel, is the same person that Glenn and others simp for. Let's start with the first part of this panel where Tucker Carlson eventually really raged at the journalist for challenging his white supremacy.
Tucker Carlson tonight on Fox News. Tucker is joining us remotely from New York. Ben, good luck.
You're a professional and I'm not.
Well, you're the top one, Ben.
But I have been watching your show a lot, and you spend a lot of time laughing about labels that are thrown at you. racist, white supremacist, the most host of the most racist show in the history of cable television. And actually, I'd rather not ask you about the labels, but sort of give you an opportunity to talk about what you believe. And to begin with, do you believe white people are superior to other races?
No, of course not. And the funny thing is, that's one of those.
Let me just stop on the yes/no question there, and just to put it a little differently before you respond, which is,
actually, if I could just answer your question.
Do you think that white people have more of a claim
white people are
on
inherently
America?
Superior in any way.
Do you think that white people have some claim on America that people of other races don't?
Of course not. I mean, first of all, I'm a Christian, so I think God made everybody, and therefore everyone has equal value in his eyes. That's the essential value of every person is the same. But the idea that I harbor some sort of deep racial animus is like, I mean, I think there are a lot of criticisms you could level at me. I think sometimes I overstate the case, I get pissed, I can be very nasty. You've been on the receiving end of that. I know you can vouch for that. But the idea that if you were to look at my texts or listen to my personal conversations or read my mind, you would find no instance where I'm like, I'm mad at black people. 100% of the people that I'm mad at are well-educated white
come out of this
liberals. In my mind.
That's not the one I wanted. It's actually my bad. I should have taken that off the list. All right, Colin, forget that one. Let's go to the next one.
Let me show you, I think, why people react this way. I think we have a clip I just wanted to show you. Sydney, can you play that?
In political terms, this policy is called the Great Replacement, the replacement of legacy Americans with more obedient people from faraway countries.
So Tucker, what's a legacy American?
People who were born here, black people, white people, Hispanic people, Asian people, people who are citizens, people who participated, generationally in our system. And a lot of them don't buy the program of the modern Democratic Party because it doesn't serve them. And so the center of the Democratic electoral strategy going forward, I'm not guessing, they talk about it constantly, you're a journalist, you must have noticed, is to bring in new people who will vote for them. Now that,
do you think,
let me just finish if you don't mind. This is not something that I made up or found on the internet. I don't even really go on the internet. This is something that Democrats, including, the architect of Obama's last victory, have talked about at great lengths in pieces, monographs, on television. They've written books about. So this is not like some crackpot Alex Jones.
Do you think when you talk about
this is the central strategy of the Democratic Party? So to be like, I can't believe you said that. I'm quoting them back to that.
You talked about generational investment. How many generations makes you a legacy American?
I'm just saying people who live here now, including immigrants.
Do you have any empathy for somebody who sees that clip, somebody who's whose parents are from India, from China, who are Jewish, and say, wow, I don't think I just see that clip, and I don't really think this guy includes me in his vision of America?
Slow down. Okay. No, I don't have any, as you said, empathy for people.
Do you understand why they might think that?
Please let me, if you don't mind, if I could finish. I have no empathy for people who derive their judgments about anything from 30-second clips on Media Matters. I do an hour live every single night. If you want to know what I think, I don't know that there's anyone who's more transparent about it than I am. Not all of my views are correct. Not all of them are attractive. You may laugh at some of them. You may be offended by others, but I'm very clear about what I think. I believe that people are not the sum total of their genetics. I say that constantly, and as a Christian, I really mean it. I actually buy the kind of Dr. Seuss, version of race understanding, which is judge a person by what he does, not by how he looks. I actually believe that. I grew up in Southern California in the 70s, and I say it constantly.
You do, and yet somehow, Tucker, I guess the thing, you have an hour every night, as you said. Let me, and I want to move on to some other questions.
Okay, don't filibuster me.
You are misunderstood, perhaps, in your view a lot. Then, both by, as you said, kind of the New York Times, but also you keep having sort of explicit white supremacists who have on secret message boards who work for you, and you have to. I know this has been very painful for you in some cases.
I've never even met a white supremacist.
You have these folks. You have folks who have posted. You have a large number of people: Scott Greer, Blake Neff. I'm just curious why you've been sort of flypaper for these people on your staff.
You're not asking me a question.
That was the question. Why have you been flypaper for these racists?
Deep breath. I've never had a white supremacist work for me. I don't think I've ever talked to a white supremacist.
Okay. So what's interesting there, first of all, what Tucker told Ben Smith, what I mean by legacy Americans, Asians, black, brown, of course, he has never said that on Fox News. So that's how you know he's bullshitting. He phrased it here in this interview because he's being challenged on what the obvious dog whistle is, legacy Americans. He did not phrase it that way on Fox News, but he said, I've never had a white supremacist work for me. I've never even talked to a white supremacist. Colin, Washington Post article. Tucker Carlson's chief writer resigns over racist and sexist posts. After an inquiry from a reporter, it took them less than a day for Fox News to receive the resignation, i.e. fire Tucker Carlson's chief writer, who exposed for the racist and sexist messages he has been covertly sharing on an online forum. Among his posts, Blake Neff had smeared black people as lazy and criminal, stated that he would not get medical care from an Asian doctor, used homophobic slurs, and repeatedly mocked a female college acquaintance by reposting her Facebook messages and photos for several years. So I could tell you, because I worked in cable news. I worked at Fox and I worked at MSNBC. That for high-level people, executive producers, senior producers, chief writers, they will check your social media. The hosts will check your social media during the interviewing process. Seems hard to believe that they would have missed that Tucker would have missed that. But he also said, I've never spoken to a white supremacist. We've already addressed that his chief writer was a white supremacist and homophobic, apparently. Never spoken to a white supremacist. Well, I'm just going to play a clip from Status Coup when Tina Desiree Berg and I addressed Tucker's response to the January 6th hearings and his complete counter-programming to the January 6th. Let's take a look. Remember, he says, I've never spoken with a white supremacist. Colin, let's play this.
Unrelenting stream of immigration.
No,
immigration. Wave.
The clip with me and Tina.
Go to Darren Beatty, our friend who runs Revolver News and has done amazing reporting on January 6th. Darren, thanks so much for joining us. What do you make of this? You've been following this since the day it happened. It culminates tonight. Your view.
My view is it's important to keep in mind what the stakes are. The stakes are the repurposing and reconfiguration of the national security apparatus against American people. Incidentally, the Department of Homeland Security has spearheaded this, and amongst his other duties, Chairman Benny Thompson is none other than the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee in Congress as well. He's the DHS's stooge in Congress when the DHS is conducting the Patriot Purge that you've spoken of so well.
So I don't even really. We'll get to his comment, but Colin, could you show the tweet? Can you show the tweet link to Darren Beatty? I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right.
Yeah, I don't know who this guy is. I'm curious now. DHS stooge. I mean,
it's at the bottom of the live stream document.
I mean, I thought the Trump administration loved all the white nationalists that they placed at the DHS. Like, is this comedy?
So let's take a look while January 6th was going on, what he tweeted. Can we play the first one? Show the first one. Tim Scott needs to learn his place and take a knee to MAGA. Next one. BLM must take a knee to MAGA. They must learn their place. Next one.
Holy shit.
Ibram Kendi needs to learn his place and take a knee to MAGA. Learn his proper role in our society. Next one.
Holy shit.
K. Cole James of Heritage Foundation needs to learn her natural place and take a knee to MAGA. Tina.
Holy shit.
So, you know what all these people he said needs to take a knee have in common?
They're black.
Yeah. Never talk to white people. I never talk to white supremacists. And for the people saying, Jordan, you do great work, but this is a waste of time. No, it's not a waste of time. because I've seen, unfortunately, a lot of leftists being sucked into this and being sucked in and hoodwinked by Tucker Carlson. And we'll get to Glenn Greenwald later. It's not a waste of time. We have to call out white supremacy. We have to expose and make sure that people who are normalizing and mainstreaming this are called out. So it is not a waste of time. So he lied twice there. He lied that he's never had a white supremacist work for him. He did. And he's talked to plenty of white supremacists. By the way, that white supremacist, Darren Beattie, was, I think, 2 guests after Glenn Greenwald on Tucker that night. Not that Glenn's responsible for the other guests Tucker Carlson has on, but Glenn's aware of other guests that go on Tucker Carlson, and that many of them are straight up white supremacists that he chooses to go on and not along with Tucker Carlson anyway. So moving on, in that clip that I showed you, he plays dumb about white supremacy. He says, no, legacy Americans. I'm talking about black people, Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans, even though he has never said that on his Fox News show. Well, let's play a little mashup that Colin put together. See if you hear that talk about black Americans being legacy Americans, Asian Americans being legacy Americans, Hispanic Americans being legacy Americans. See if you hear that in this little mashup of Tucker's greatest hits.
Unrelenting stream of immigration, mass immigration, wave of demographic change to change the racial mix of the country. Too much change. By giving them amnesty, and not long after that, by giving them absentee ballots. To reduce the political power of people whose ancestors lived here and dramatically increase the proportion of Americans newly arrived from the third world. The left and all the little gatekeepers on Twitter become literally hysterical if you use the term replacement. In political terms, this policy is called the Great Replacement. Shut up, you're dying, we're going to replace you. The replacement of legacy Americans with more obedient people from faraway countries. New people, more obedient voters from the third world. They don't complain, they don't file HR complaints, they just do what they're told. I have less political power because they're importing a brand new electorate. Why should I sit back and take that?
They can't win re-election in 2022 unless they bring in a large number of new voters to replace the voters that are already here. We have an invasion in this country.
I couldn't agree with you more. The downsides of all of this are becoming very obvious to everybody. In fewer than 20 years, the culture their parents and grandparents had built evaporated. We have a moral obligation to admit the world's poor, they tell us, even if it makes our own country poorer and dirtier and more divided. You think that the little piece of America you're responsible for, that you represent in the Congress, would be clean, but hers isn't. Why?
Well, part of the reason is because her district is actually one of the least American districts in the country.
One rule about America is we pick up our shit. We don't leave it by the side of the road. Sorry, not allowed. We don't do that here. I want to live in a clean country.
They don't want you to know that there's an option to the chaos and filth and crime growing all around us.
And you got to love my favorite thing, and I even saw it in the chat. And by the way, smash the like button. We got 400 people watching, but only 182 likes. So we need another 200 likes. My favorite response, not just to Tucker Carlson, Glenn Greenwald, Jimmy Dore. If you ever criticize them, if you ever play their clips, oh, you're taking them out of context. You're taking them out of context. You're taking them out of context. Doesn't matter what they say. It's all out of context. Everything is out of context. We could play an hour clip. It's out of context. Take your blinders off. I don't know if you heard in any of those clips him mention Black Americans, Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans as the legacy Americans he's referring to. I didn't. But if you want to go further back in the time machine, let's see what Tucker Carlson, who they say is now anti-war, was pretty damn pro-war when it came to Iraq. Let's see what he had to say about Iraqis.
Iraq is a crappy place filled with a bunch of, semi-literate primitive monkeys. But I just have zero sympathy for them or their culture, a culture where people just don't use toilet paper or forks.
And the way they treat women, I agree with you. Their culture is, but you're in their homeland, and you're over there as an American who they hate, and they want nothing more than the Americans off of their soil. So they're not going to play games.
They can just shut the fuck up and obey, is my view.
How could you salvage Iraq at this point?
I don't, it's beyond our control. I mean, if somehow the Iraqis decided to behave like human beings or something, he'd need to say, look, I'm a bigot, okay? I'm a bigot. I don't like Islamic extremists. Like, if you are really heavily into Islam, I'm sorry, I don't care for you that much. And I don't care what that sounds like. You can call me a racist. You can come where the fuck you want.
And at this juncture, you could say that and not catch a lot of shit for it.
You certainly could. I'd vote for you if you said that. white men have, they've contributed some, I would say, like creating civilization and stuff. I think they've done a pretty, I don't know, whatever.
Obama would kick your ass playing basketball.
Yeah, of course he would. Play basketball, come on.
He's black, say it. He's a real brother. Hey, do you think
I don't know how black he is. How is he black, for one thing? He has one white parent, one black parent.
Well,
so that makes him, why isn't he white? There's some really good, immigrants. I just think it's, people who come to this country ought to have something to offer. Be hot, be really smart. You know what I mean?
Well, to Tucker would say, and Glenn would say, oh, Media Matters. I don't watch Media Matters. I don't think I've seen clips from them in 10 years. But those are Tucker's words. They're not out of context. That's what he said. And I don't really care that it was in 2006. Does somebody saying those things really change? Did he evolve somehow? I think my favorite part was shut the fuck up and obey. And thank you for pointing that out. Kat, Faye, and somebody else said it. He left out with his retroactive saying that legacy Americans, he added in Asians and black people and Hispanic people. He left out the actual legacy Americans, which are indigenous people. Those are the legacy Americans that we kidnapped, murdered, and committed genocide on, and raped and committed genocide on. But it's just, you can't really take people seriously that say they're being taken out of context. The New York Times, Colin, if you have the link, the New York Times did a story. I think it's towards the bottom. Hold on. Where is that story? The New York Times. Oh, here it is. Fringe conspiracy theory. The New York Times did a story and they studied it. This man has talked about white replacement or great replacement over 400 times. Over 400 times. No public figure has promoted replacement theory more loudly or relentlessly than Fox host Tucker Carlson, who has made elite-led demographic change a central theme of his show since joining Fox primetime lineup in 2016. A Times investigation published this month showed that in more than 400 episodes of his show, Carlson has amplified the notion that Democratic politicians and other assorted elites want to force demographic change through immigration. And his producers sometimes scoured his show's raw material from some of the dark corners of the internet that the Buffalo suspect did. The story goes on to talk about that they have gotten things from 4chan, the Daily Stormer, which is a white supremacist neo-Nazi channel. So, but he's taken out of context. Oh, he doesn't know what he's doing. And to be clear, people saying, well, why is it important to cover this? Number one, he has the largest cable TV news channel show in America. And number two, really discouragingly, I've seen a lot of leftists being sucked in by Tucker Carlson and posting Tucker Carlson clips. I don't know if they're leftists. I don't know if they're just getting hoodwinked, but almost posting, hey, Tucker's right on this. Tucker's right on this. No, he's not. He's a grifter. He's a charlatan. The New York Times has done other reporting where people that have known him for 20 years say that Tucker today is literally unrecognizable. Tucker Carlson, for 20 years in television news and journalism, was your Chamber of Commerce establishment Republican. Remember, he was on Crossfire on CNN. Remember that clip where Jon Stewart infamously went after him for basically being part of the problem as partisan establishment media? But you cannot normalize this. And my problem has never been the fact that people like Glenn Greenwald, Jimmy Dore, or others go on his show. I would go on his show. I probably wouldn't be invited back, though, because I wouldn't just nod along with him. And if I was making a leftist argument, I would challenge him on his white supremacy. And I would challenge him on his conspiracy theories. By the way, he did a documentary for Fox suggesting that January 6th was somehow a false flag. It wasn't. To be clear, YouTube, it wasn't, because YouTube will ding us. He did that, putting out that January 6th was somehow a false flag operation. So when leftists go on his show and like Glenn, I don't know if Glenn Greenwald's a leftist per se. I think he's clearly playing to a right-wing audience and he's a grifter at this point. But when people watch Glenn going on his show and just nodding along with him, it gives the impression that Tucker Carlson isn't a straight up racist pretending he's not, isn't a big fat liar when he is a liar. Colin, let's play the rest of the clip with Ben Smith and Tucker Carlson.
Tucker Carlson tonight.
American.
People who were born here, black people, white people, Hispanic people.
Me and his vision of America?
Slow down. Okay. No, I don't have any, as you said, empathy for people who...
Do you understand why they might think that?
Please let me, if you don't mind, if I could finish. I have no empathy for people who derive their judgments about anything from 30-second clips on Media Matters. I do an hour live every single night. If you want to know what I think, I don't know that there's anyone who's more transparent about it than I am. Not all of my views are correct. Not all of them are attractive. You may laugh at some of them. You may be offended by others, but I'm very clear about what I think. I believe that people are not the sum total of their genetics. I say that constantly, and as a Christian, I really mean it. I actually buy the kind of Dr. Seuss, please, version of race understanding, which is judge a person by what he does, not by how he looks. I actually believe that. I grew up in Southern California in the 70s, and I say it constantly.
You do, but yet somehow, Tucker, and I guess the thing that, you have an hour every night, as you said. Let me, and I want to move on to some other questions.
So he believes people aren't the sum of their genetic whatever. I wonder how that factors into the whole Iraqis are primitive monkeys and shut the fuck up and obey. I don't know how long Ben Smith had with him, but if I ever had the luxury of interviewing Tucker Carlson, you better believe I'd have these clips lined up. It's just preposterous that people say, I see people in the chat, he doesn't have an ounce of white supremacy. White supremacy, to be clear, white supremacy doesn't just mean somebody literally uses the N-word or literally calls Hispanic slurs or calls Asian slurs. That's not what, I mean, of course, that is white supremacy, but you don't have to say those cringe things out loud to be pushing white supremacy. What Tucker Carlson has pushed, particularly with the invaders, it's an invasion, and immigration, endless immigration, this and that, is the oldest trick of the book. It is distracting from the real source of people's pain, neoliberalism, a corrupt government that has sold out the working class, white and black and brown, a corrupt government that literally is bought by corporate America, a corrupt media. It is totally ignoring those things and dangling the other over the working class that I just read off to you has been screwed. Dangling the immigrants over who are not taking your jobs. Dangling the invaders who are trying to change the fabric of America, terminology he has used. You think Tucker Carlson is taking on corporate America? You think Tucker Carlson is going down the list of politicians and who's donating money to them? You think Tucker Carlson is doing long segments on the fact that politicians spend 75% of their time in Washington dialing for dollars? You think Tucker Carlson did a whole long thing on NAFTA and how that decimated the industrial Midwest? Think Tucker Carlson is doing excessive and long-winded segments about the corporate invaders that leveled black communities? And by the way, I have gone after other Fox News hosts, including Laura Ingraham, to the Tucker fanboy. But then we need to move on to Glenn Greenwald, who, you know, he's a lawyer. He's good at throwing out a lot of words to deflect. But Glenn Greenwald, you know, if you want to call him a leftist, I wouldn't. But Glenn Greenwald, I mean, lives on Tucker Carlson's show. I can't remember one time Glenn Greenwald has ever pushed back on Tucker Carlson. Hell, after the Buffalo shooting, where the shooter and his manifesto didn't sound much different than a standard Tucker Carlson monologue, Glenn wrote a long, incoherent Substack piece basically saying Tucker Carlson isn't talking about race. He's never talked about immigration or, you know, the invaders in terms of race. Again, Glenn is a very smart man. He's a lawyer. He's a Pulitzer Prize winning. He's intentionally playing dumb because I guess Tucker is, and other right wingers that he goes on has been his meal ticket. Again, I don't mind that he goes on Tucker Carlson, but when you literally sit there and nod along with his propaganda and white supremacy and lunacy, I don't want to hear what a champion of the left he is. And this clip, I don't, for people who want to just drool over Glenn Greenwald and have such blinders on that everything is taken out of context and he's a hero and he can never be criticized. Yeah, watch this clip. Here's Glenn Greenwald with Tucker Carlson. Tucker is in Brazil, and Tucker was basically doing a fanboy thing for fascist President Jair Bolsonaro, who, by the way, if we could show the image, Colin, Tucker made sure to stand with Bolsonaro with a native headdress, which is insulting, I could tell you, as somebody who reported extensively at the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation, for any white person, I don't care what the context is, to be wearing a native headdress. But there's Tucker, not a white supremacist, never talks to white supremacists, never does anything white supremacy, standing with a native headdress with President Jair Bolsonaro. Here's Glenn, who, by the way, was almost imprisoned by the president of Brazil, who tried to censor Glenn for his credit to Glenn, his great journalism that exposed the corruption of the Brazilian courts that railroaded Lula and falsely imprisoned Lula, and Bolsonaro's role in that. Bolsonaro's government went after Glenn. They tried to imprison him. There were ample threats to Glenn and his family. Here's Glenn on Tucker Carlson while Tucker Carlson tries to whitewash Bolsonaro.
But the question of American media is important here because Bolsonaro, no matter what you think of him, relies pretty much exclusively on American-owned tech platforms, Twitter specifically, to get his message out. Doesn't that make him totally vulnerable to censorship by American companies?
Well, he has been repeatedly censored by big tech platforms. He, when speaking about COVID, was often censored. When speaking about the upcoming election, is often censored. So Facebook and Google are essentially dictating to Brazilians what they can and can't hear, including from their own democratically elected president. And again, no matter what you think of Bolsonaro, you should have to think that that's a pretty serious problem. And I think it's a very similar dynamic to what has happened in the U.S., where the entire establishment essentially united against Trump. And so all these institutions that liberals and the left in the United States have long held with such contempt, neocons and the security state and corporate media, all united against Trump. And suddenly they were viewed with such favor by the American left and by American liberalism. That has happened to a large extent here. A Brazilian leftist will now often talk about Globo, long worst enemy of the Brazilian left, with a lot of gratitude and admiration. Yeah, it's the major media company that has become completely hostile to Bolsonaro because, again, Bolsonaro ran on a platform of anti-establishment challenge and defiance, and that's not what his government is, but just the rhetoric itself has made the establishment turn against him.
Putting aside, I can't speak for Glenn. Just because I'm criticizing Glenn, it doesn't erase done great journalism, won a Pulitzer, terrific reporting, obviously, on the NSA surveillance, his great reporting on Brazil and the corruption. Two things could be true at once. Somebody could have journalistic skills and do great journalism and suddenly become a hack. So I don't take away his journalism. He's done great journalism. But taking away the fact that you're literally sitting there and nodding for your BFF there, Tucker Carlson, to somehow make the president of Brazil the victim. Oh, he's a victim of American censorship. The fact that Glenn Greenwald, I don't know if he just has no self-respect for himself, or he's such a sycophant for Tucker Carlson, and he knows that if he loses his Tucker Carlson primetime spot, where else is he going to go? I mean, he goes on other right-wing shows from time to time, but Tucker is certainly his biggest audience. There's definitely a link between going on Tucker Carlson and an increase to Glenn's, Substack subscriptions, social media following, et cetera, et cetera. Putting aside the fact that you're literally sitting there nodding and going along with the whitewashing of Bolsonaro not even mentioning. I don't know. He tried to censor you and your journalism. That's like me, who's reported extensively about former governor of Michigan, Rick Snyder, who, by the way, charges were just dismissed against for presiding over the poisoning of Flint. And if that governor tried to go after me for my reporting, and I won't get into details, but there has been efforts to go after me behind the scenes, not just by Governor Snyder, but others, that would be the equivalent of him trying to go after me, imprison me, and me going on Fox News and nodding along that, oh, he's such a victim of censorship. Oh, we're going to tell you how it's whitewashing. Besides him not mentioning, I don't know, Bolsonaro tried to censor you by imprisoning you for journalism. I mean, you don't have to be a Brazilian. It's like a basic Google search. Bolsonaro is all he's about is censorship. Colin, Rolling Stone, censorship is alive and well. Marina slams Brazilian government attempt to silence musicians. On Saturday, a Brazilian political official ordered Lollapalooza, Brazil, to ban political demonstrations from its future events after Marina and other performers shared their distaste for the country's government on stage the night before. Note, the Welsh artist is speaking out against artist censorship. Censorship is still alive and well, she wrote on Twitter Tuesday, referring to the electoral judge's order calling for a $10,500 fine for any artist who uses the Lollapalooza stage to address politics. Marina and Pablo Vittar were among the artists who were named in the judge's order after speaking out against the country's far-right president, Jair Bolsonaro, during their sets at Lollapalooza, in which the official called propaganda and premature campaigning. Brazil's election is set for later this year. Marina tweeted, censorship is alive and well. Bolsonaro's lawyers have petitioned to the Supreme Electoral Court to stop artists from making political demonstrations due to me and two other artists voicing opinions at Lollapalooza. So many of us are sick of these old men who think they own the countries they lead. They don't own anything, and they are weaker than we think. Gee, you would think, you know, a free speech absolutist like Glenn might have mentioned that in a discussion about Bolsonaro being a victim of social media censorship. Oh, was that out of context too? Is that out of context too? But there's also more. There's more. Bolsonaro has also tried to censor, hold on, human sciences targeted by Bolsonaro, censorship and persecution. Even before he became president of Brazil, Bolsonaro was outspokenly against human science subjects that promote critical thinking in schools and universities. The president recently announced Abraham Weintraub, a minister of education, a man who claims he intends to decentralize investment in the country's philosophy and sociology schools to focus on the areas that generate immediate return, like veterinary, engineering, and medicine. Wow, sounds like Ron DeSantis trying to take over public education in Florida. Then you have censorship cases in Brazil under Bolsonaro multiply. There have been almost 200 occurrences since 2019, says organization that monitors freedom of expression. Significant censorship cases have marked the cultural scene just 5 months into the new year. The federal government and some city governments tried to avoid political demonstration by the artists or to withdraw such works from circulation. This is the visible part of 195 cases of a curtailment of art recorded since 2019. That is during the term of Bolsonaro. The data is from Movimento Mobile, a network of organizations that work in defense of artistic freedom. Wow. I don't know. With free speech absolutists like Glenn Greenwald, who needs enemies? Besides the fact that you're sitting there nodding along with your BFF Tucker Carlson, who I guess is your right-wing meal ticket for your Substack, your social media following, et cetera, you don't challenge him. You don't point out, hey, we should also point out that Bolsonaro himself is a major censor. He's tried to censor the sciences in Brazil, the cultural arts, musicians, artists. Oh, and me, and imprison me. Oh, God. Oh, give me a break, Ian. Take your fucking blinders off, man. Jordan, Glenn's position is the same as Chomsky's. He's not defending fascism. He's defending freedom of speech. Oh, yeah? Like the freedom of speech Bolsonaro gives to artists and scientists and professors? That freedom of speech? That's the point. There's a reason someone as smart as Glenn Greenwald doesn't bring these things up on Tucker Carlson's show. There's a reason for this. There's a reason that he doesn't bring any of these things up. There's a reason he didn't even bring up the fact that Bolsonaro was trying to censor him with imprisonment, because he knows the audience he's playing to. Now, I'm not telling you to cancel him. Watch him if you want. Read his work. Subscribe to his Substack. It's not for me to tell you who to support. You don't have to listen to me all the time. Don't blindly follow anyone, including me. But it's just laughable that people would watch a segment like this where Glenn is somehow making Bolsonaro. Yes, Bolsonaro did threaten Greenwald's family. That Glenn is somehow making Bolsonaro a victim of censorship. The Brazilian media covers him endlessly. A victim of censorship when his regime has done nothing but try to censor dissidents, political dissidents, the scientific community, the artistic community. Not even mentioned. Not even mentioned. And have some self-respect. The man tried to prison you. You had threats to your family. Not a mention. Not a mention. Honestly, it's laughable. And who was the first guest after the Buffalo shooting on Tucker Carlson's show to whitewash Tucker Carlson and his daily monologues sounding identical to the shooter's manifesto? Glenn Greenwald, who was outraged that anyone was bringing up Tucker Carlson and his white replacement propaganda in the same sentence as this shooter. Now, I never said Tucker Carlson was directly responsible for what the gunman did, because that would be irresponsible. But it doesn't matter whether he was directly responsible for what the Buffalo shooter did. It is kind of a story when the #1 television news host in ratings, when his nightly monologues, which the New York Times reported and investigated over 400 times, he had segments on the white replacement or great replacement, the same thing, sounds kind of identical to a mass shooter. It's a joke. And you want to know something? People like Glenn, there's channels that are sycophants to Glenn. There's channels that don't call him out on this shit because him coming on their show, gives them views, this and that. They don't want to get in bad stead with Glenn. I don't really give a damn if he comes on or not. But this is a bigger thing than just Glenn Greenwald. There's a real toxicity online, not just on the left, all around, that people literally have blinders on, because they hero worship certain journalists and certain hosts. They have blinders on, complete blinders on, because they worship Jimmy, Glenn, others, where they can't look at things objectively anymore. And they say, oh, he's done great journalistic things. That's fine. You could give him credit for that. But also open your eyes now. Something has changed. And I think this tweet kind of says it all, Colin, if we could show the tweet where Glenn is defending his appearance on Tucker Carlson's show, where he nods along with Tucker Carlson about the victim of censorship, Bolsonaro. This is a screenshot, if you have it, Colin. Somebody on Twitter wrote, no mention that Bolsonaro tried to imprison you or that he tried to silence you seems relevant to a conversation about press freedom and censorship in Brazil. Why didn't you bring those topics up? Oh, that's a pretty good question. I've talked many times about Brazil's attempts to criminalize my journalism by Bolsonaro's justice minister, as has Tucker. Oh, yeah? I'd love to see that. Beyond his show, he recorded a video denouncing such attempts. But there's more to say about a major country of 230 million beyond what happened to me. What? So it's no longer relevant, the person responded, when you're talking about press freedom in Brazil? I mean, it's so preposterous. Of course he didn't bring it up, because Tucker Carlson was in Brazil standing for Bolsonaro and trying to prop up Bolsonaro because he's up for re-election. And right now, the polls are not looking good for Bolsonaro against Lula. That's what Tucker Carlson's mission is in Brazil, to lift Bolsonaro up and help him get reelected. You think he's just in Brazil to like highlight Bolsonaro's good deeds? Glenn knows that. But this person makes a good point, to which Glenn says there's more to a country than me. The topic in that clip was about censorship, was about Bolsonaro's censorship, or Bolsonaro being a victim of censorship. I didn't choose the topic. Tucker Carlson brought it up. You are the free speech absolutist, right, Glenn? You're the censorship guy against censorship. Well, you conveniently left out that this man is a giant authoritarian censorship king, or wannabe. One second. Yes, purposely left out. So for those who want to twist themselves into pretzels defending this shit, ask yourself, why did he leave those details out? Ask yourself, when he writes his long, incoherent Substack pieces, why? Why does he leave out the stuff Tucker Carlson said about Iraqis being primitive monkeys? They should shut the fuck up and obey. Because he knows where his audience is. And he says, well, I don't get invited on MSNBC. I don't get invited on CNN. That might be true, but you could kind of push back for the principles you state you claim to care about. He doesn't. And by the way, on the whole censorship point, besides the fact that Glenn is quiet as a mouse as the governor of the third largest state, Ron DeSantis, I don't know, passes law to ban protests in residential neighborhoods, i.e. outside of politicians' homes. As the governor of Florida passed laws to allow drivers to legally run over protesters. The governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, is passed something to criminalize BDS. The governor of Florida passed gag orders, essentially, on gay teachers and students. The governor of Florida is banning math textbooks with critical race theory. Quiet on all those things. Such a free speech absolutist. Credit to Jimmy. I criticize him when he should be criticized. Jimmy at least tweeted about Ron DeSantis doing these things. I think it was last week Jimmy did that. So at least he did his one customary attack on Republicans for the month. Jimmy does about 1 or 2 attacks on Republicans. The rest are Democrats. But Glenn, for someone that's pretty anti-censorship, here's Glenn in 2018 and his writings in 2018 about censoring Bolsonaro's son. Would you look at that? If you could put that up, Colin. Numerous Twitter users, in responding to Bolsonaro, posted the Snopes debunking article and also indicated that they have reported the city council member's false tweet to Twitter. Posting a fake pamphlet explicitly designed to incite hatred for LGBT people is without question a violation of Twitter rules. Hateful conduct. You may not promote violence against, threaten, or harass other people on the basis of race, ethnicity, national origin, sexual orientation, gender, gender identity, religious affiliation, age, disability, or serious disease. Hateful conduct includes behavior that incites fear about a protected group. Twitter has thus far not only failed to suspend Bolsonaro's account, but has also allowed the fake post to remain. In the meantime, Bolsonaro, responding to objections that he posted fictitious material, added more claims asserting the false and disproven link between gay men and pedophilia, including one from his dad asserting the same link and another with photographs purporting to be of gay men holding signs advocating for pedophilia. Gee, Glenn Greenwald, 2018. Sounds like he's calling for Bolsonaro's son to be kicked off Twitter. Sounds a lot different than the Glenn Greenwald of 2022 now, doesn't it? Core principles. There's some who have them, and there's some that are flexible. That was Glenn just a few years ago, asking, why hasn't Twitter gotten rid of Bolsonaro's son for posting fake news? At the end of the day, folks, you could support whoever you want. If you want to watch Tucker Carlson, God bless. You want to support Glenn, God bless. You want to support me, double God bless. But I think people need to really take a look at actions, not words. Because I've always lived my life. Actions speak louder than words. And you have to look at people and their intelligence level. He's a smart guy. Glenn's a smart guy. He knows who Tucker Carlson is. He knows what Tucker Carlson pushes. He knows the type of people that watch Tucker Carlson. And he knows the type of guests Tucker Carlson has on. And if you are a free speech absolutist, particularly that was targeted by this president, Bolsonaro, and you go on and basically nod along with the premise that Bolsonaro is a victim of censorship and framing that's why he's behind right now and possibly going to lose because he's a victim of censorship, you're not a serious person. If you're somebody who leaves out that this president is for authoritarian censorship and has pushed authoritarian censorship all the way to the Supreme Court of Brazil to censor artists and musicians who criticize him, you're not a serious person about censorship and free speech. Also, a couple years ago, he was writing about why isn't Twitter taking action on Bolsonaro's son. So that's all I got, but I'm going to continue calling out where I think it needs to be called out because unfortunately there is a lot of good-hearted leftists being sucked in and hoodwinked by whatever you want to call these people. I don't know if Glenn considers himself a leftist. If he does, that's a joke. He's for Citizens United. He's always been for Citizens United, which is one of the things destroying democracy, which we don't have. He's for Citizens United. If you read his blog posts in the mid-2000s, he was ranting about illegal immigration. When he seems to be more at home when he's on shows like Tucker, Megyn Kelly, the former Fox News, Santa's White Kids. He was just on with her, giggling along. Again, the problem isn't that you take on liberalism or take on Democrats. The problem is when you basically duct tape your mouth for Republican extremism, Republican fascism, Republican attacks on free speech, Republican attacks, Republican censorship. When you only have selective core principles against the Democratic Party, because that's what gets you clicks, or that's what gets you Substack followers and paid subscribers, yeah, I have a hard time believing you truly have core principles. Let me read some super chats here. Double K, 1999. Thank you. Anzu Mazaki, $1.99. Griftwald licks Bolsonaro's boot and abandons Lula. I don't really know how people could watch that clip of him on Tucker Carlson, which is not taken out of context. That's his words. That was the clip. It wasn't edited. That he doesn't mention Bolsonaro's attacks on him. trying to imprison him for journalism. Kind of a big censorship thing, wouldn't you believe? Doesn't mention Bolsonaro's rampant censorship attempts through himself and his government. I don't know how you take somebody seriously or think they're a principled person on free speech. Of course, he's quiet as a mouse on DeSantis and other right-wing extremism and attacks on free speech here. If you want to twist yourself and make excuses for it, by all means, go ahead and do so. All right. Reminder, folks. Reminder. By the way, we're moving our guest for Pete Buttigieg to tomorrow because I have to run for an appointment for my car. So we're moving that guest to tomorrow. A reminder. Currently, we're working on scheduling our next reporting trip. Inflation Nation. Inflation Nation. We want to get out on the road. We want to cover your stories. How is these high gas prices affecting you? High food prices, high electricity bills, high rent, a lot of people being priced out of their communities. A lot of people facing eviction. I've spoken with people who are literally a month away from homelessness. Obviously, there's a slippery slope and a thin line between economic pain and depression, anxiety, marital problems, alcoholism, opioids, you name it. So we're looking for folks in the flesh to interview, thinking the Northeast and the Midwest. We're going to be driving through a few states. So if you have a compelling story, based on inflation, but there were a lot of people hurting before this inflation started a couple months ago. Email us, info@statuscoup.com, info@statuscoup.com. Email us your story, where you live, because we're probably going to hit the road in about a week and a half, and hopefully stay on the road for about a week to 2 weeks. Reporting, we've done this during the pandemic a few times. One trip was at the beginning of the pandemic. Another one was last year. We really want to do old school journalism, giving the microphone back to the people, So please, please, please email us your story, info@statuscoup.com. My DMs are open on Twitter as well, so you could DM me on Twitter if you'd prefer. We really want to start lining people up. Probably going to start out in Pennsylvania, and then from there, who knows, Ohio, possibly Michigan, Kentucky, West Virginia. We don't know. I don't want to deal with the airlines right now, so we're just going to drive. So definitely send us your story, info@statuscoup.com. The other thing is, I announced this a few days ago, we are looking for some journalists, some live streamers, and reporters on the ground, because I'll be taking some time off in the fall to work on some other projects, probably around November, December, possibly January. I'll be taking some time off, definitely returning, don't worry. Have some projects that I want to work on, including a book. So we're looking for folks that could live stream when I'm gone, daily. Could take reporting trips. So if you got some journalistic experience, if you have some on-air experience, definitely email us at info@statuscoup.com. I love activists, but we're not really looking for like political activists. We're looking for folks that have some journalism experience or, some on-air experience. It doesn't have to be one or the other, people that could just live stream and maybe can't break news, but cover the news, and people that could go cover stories on the ground, build sources, that kind of thing. It would start out as temporary, but based on how it goes, maybe keep you on after when I return. So if you fit the bill, reach out to us at info@statuscoup.com. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again here tomorrow, 5 o'clock Eastern time. Take care.